Hi there. Today we're going to be doing an unboxing of Duel of Fates. When you order Duel of Fates, you'll be getting two separate complete decks, the Chinese History deck and the Middle Eastern History deck. Both packs come with 40 different cards, along with a notepad to keep track of player HP during the game, and 12 heart tokens that help track individual card health during the war phase of the game. Now, you'll see here, each deck has a teaser of the cards that you'll see in the decks. This is the Theocracy card on the back, and Harun al-Rashid is on the front. These decks have a variety of champion cards, army cards, foundation cards, event cards, and resource cards. Now, I'd like to go ahead and start opening these boxes up. I'm going to start organizing the deck into the categories of cards to help make this a little easier. Our first category that you're going to see is the rules and overview cards, all in white. This shows us how our playing field should be set up. This will be a QR code if you ever need to rewatch this video. This shows how what classes work well with each other, the prerequisites that we have, and it's just going to be a quick overview of the rules. Next, we have our army cards. The way in which we know that these are army cards is because typically to the left-hand side, it'll tell you what army they are from, what time period they're from. They have their typical attack and defense. They will have their health, but there's no description at the bottom and there's no banner at the top. Moving forward, we have our champion cards. These are going to be the crux of how we play. This is going to be the historical figures that we've all come to know in our curriculum, whether this is Sun Yat-sen, Mao Zedong, Zheng He, or Hong Shou-Tren. These are just a few cards that we see in the Chinese edition. Next, we have our foundation cards. These are going to be key geographical locations throughout world history, and this allows us to summon champion cards when we're actually playing the game. You'll see every foundation card explicitly states that it is a foundation card, as well as a name and a quick history blurb of what its significance is. Finally, we have our event and resource cards. These are going to directly affect how the game is played, whether there are eras of peace where no one may attack, or whether you do 2 times damage, 3 times damage, so on and so forth. Again, just like the foundation cards, the resource and event cards explicitly state what they are, they'll give a historical blurb, and then the effect that they have on the game. Each deck comes with this summary as a card, just in case you need a refresher of the difference between resource, foundation, army cards, and champion cards. In this deck, we also see the layout and the guide to how to properly play and assemble your playing field. With that, I'm now going to set up a pseudo deck with 3 army cards, which is the maximum amount that you can summon at one point. Now, when army cards are played on the field, they may be in the attack position of vertical or horizontal position of defense, and they may be face up or face down. This may entice your opponent to attack you or ward them off and play more defensively. You can mix and match throughout the rounds as you wish. And at the bottom, we see the HP in which every card has. Here's a closer look of it. This card would have 2 attacks, 6 defense, but 5 health points. So maybe you play more defensively with this card, or you could go aggressive and sacrifice some of your health, but we'll get into that later. With this setup, we see the foundation cards next to our army and champion cards, almost boxing them in. So we're going to start setting some of those up to see what it looks like. Now, I am placing down 3 foundation cards right now. 1 Earth, 1 Desert, and 1 Oceanic and Sea card. There is 1 more spot if you would like to have an extra one, but for now, I'm just setting 3 up. This is just one more look at the cards, just in case you need it. And from there, we are now going to be able to start summoning our champion cards. Earlier, we had talked about the ideas of a war banner. This indicates what foundation needs to be played in order to place this card, as well as how many armies must be present on the field. So we see the Earth Foundation and 2 army cards are needed to summon Hong Shou-Tren to the battlefield. Here, we see another Water Foundation type with 1 army, but yet it requires a champion as well, which is indicated with the coat of arms at the top. So now that all 3 of these have been met, he can be summoned onto the field. From there, he can still, just like the army cards, be played face up or face down, horizontally or vertically. When a champion is played on the field, their specific effect also comes into play instantaneously. For example, when Hong Shou-Tren is summoned, you can sacrifice an army card in order to destroy a resource, event, or a champion card from the other side automatically. If you choose a champion card, that would subtract 1 HP from the player health, getting you 1 step closer to winning the game. Now, we did include a cheat sheet of sorts to see what are their classes. Classes can affect if you do twice as much damage, maybe you do half damage to certain groups or cards, so you can build your deck how you want. We also have a cheat sheet for our banners, which means that this will help you decipher if it's one army, two armies, three armies, so on and so forth. Following our placement of the army, champion, and foundation cards, we have our event and resource cards. These can also be placed face up or face down, and they typically affect the round at the beginning, but some of them do take place during your opponent's turn. Here we would see if you equip this instantaneously, your army cards will survive in battle when they would typically die. So you can choose which resource and event cards you include in your final decks. Every game will follow this exact setup of at most having 3 army, 3 champion, 4 foundations, and 2 event cards. So now I'd like to do a mock setup. First, you need to divide your foundation and army and resource cards into their own decks. So this is my foundation deck, which has about 8 cards, and the leftovers of everything else is here. Now I'm mixing these up, hoping that it's enough of a shuffle to give us a variety for when we draw our first cards. Every game begins by drawing 2 foundation cards. Following that, you get to draw 5 of your regular cards. If you have a well-balanced deck, you should get some event cards, some resource cards, armies, and champions in your first draw. Here, we see some oceanic and desert cards, some army cards, but only 1 champion card, so maybe I could do better next time. I'll still place down my foundation decks, and I have an event card, but that's only relevant when enemies are on the field, so I'll place that face down, and I am going to play 3 army cards. Now, when I play these army cards, I'm going to see which stats are highest, and that's what indicates whether they are vertical or horizontal. When I look at my champion, I also see that I don't meet the prerequisites, so I can't place a champion down, so I cannot attack the player on this turn. So right now, I'm going in a mostly defensive position, and now that my turn has ended, I can draw cards. Now, I can choose to draw from my main deck, in which I draw until I have 7 cards again, or I can choose to draw from my foundation card, which would give me just 1 card only. But if it was an earth card, I could then summon Hongsho Tren. Because I opted to draw from my main deck, I was able to draw a Marco Polo card, which I already met the prerequisites for, so I can summon him instantly. And from there, I am now able to attack the player directly or continue to summon more champion cards. You can summon up to 3 champions at once and 3 army cards at once. Now, if you have the Battle Deck Edition, we do recommend that you place your heart tokens at this time, making sure that this is a way in which you can configure or trace the health during battles. If you don't have the tokens, you can use coins, paper, markers, or just the notepad. But I'd like to go into how the actual battles are fought now in this game. When war has been declared by 2 opposing players, you will see typically 1 attacking player calculating their attack stats with the defensive player's attack stats. So here, the Mongols have 4 versus 2, so the Red Turbans should lose 2, not 3 health. But if the defensive player, the defending player, was in defense position, I have 4 attack and he has 6 defense. So because his defense is stronger than mine, I can still sacrifice 1 HP to lower both of our health. And the same thing happens with our champion cards. So here we see a 7 attack versus a 5 attack, so Marco Polo will lose 2 health. But if Marco Polo were in the defensive position, even though my attack equals his defense, I will take damage as well, as will he, only by 1 HP. So army cards and champion cards fight identically with one another. Following the conclusion of your attacks, this ends your turn, and you would take away from the field any armies or champions who had fallen in battle. Remember, army cards do not affect a player health, but champion cards do. If I lost 2 champions that turn, then I lose 2 out of my 10 health points, meaning that I can only lose 10 champions per game before the game is over. Now, if no champions are present on my opponent's field, I am able to attack the player directly. But even if I have 3 champions on the field, I can only attack the player once. At most, you can lose 1 HP per round if you are defenseless, but if you have 3 champions on the deck and it's a 3v3 fight and they kill 3 of your champions, that is a -3 at the end of this turn. Some final miscellaneous notes. If any resource or event card attacks or removes a champion from the deck, this does still affect the player's health. For instance, the Bubonic Plague, you may destroy one champion card if you wish. This would destroy 1 HP from your opposing player. So keep this in mind. Event and resource cards are just as formidable, if not more so, than champion cards. If you happen to have an awful hand at the beginning of the game, you can also subtract one of your own player healths and reshuffle your deck and redraw. If at any point during the game this exact thing happens and you have an unplayable hand where no cards can be played, you may discard your hand, but you do not reshuffle the deck. You simply just place those cards into the memorial, subtract 1 HP from your overall health again, and you may draw new cards. Keep in mind, if you run out of cards, you may lose the game. So this is not always the optimal path and more so a Hail Mary. With that, this was just a quick tutorial, and I hope it cleared some things up of how the game is played, and I hope you enjoy your Duel of Fates Battle Deck Edition, and I hope to see you for when we release the next decks.